Bienvenidos a Encuentros con Cineastas en el Aguilar Film Festival, donde hablamos con los directores que participan en la sección oficial del festival, aquí en Aguilar de Campoo. Y hoy vamos a hablar con Simon Zhou, creo que lo he pronunciado bien, que compite con el corto francés COIFFEUR, peluquero, sería la traducción. Es una tragicomedia llena de tensión, hay mucha tensión, y todo transcurre en una peluquería. Una peluquería donde una noche llega la hermana del peluquero y se crea una situación de tensión que a la vez contrasta con la necesidad del peluquero de atender a la clienta que tiene en ese momento. Por momentos es casi un thriller. Es mejor no desvelar demasiado, lo digo ya en otros cortos, pero en este particular pues también, y dejarse llevar para disfrutar de la tensión de la película. Hello Simon, how are you?
Hi, I'm well, thank you.
Welcome to the Aguilar Film Festival.
Thank you for selecting the film.
Okay. Well, you work. I mean, you worked in the past as a journalist, and you were critic. You do reviews. So you are like a kind of those people who were in the Nouvelle Vague in France in the 50s. You were a critic, and then you decided to make a film. How was the experience?
I think it's an overestimation of my abilities to compare my work to those of the Nouvelle Vague, but I do think there's maybe a certain kinship, an intention at least, between the films of the Nouvelle Vague, the French New Wave, and what I tried to do with this film, which is, to sum it up briefly, I think the French New Wave, it was interested in expanding the definition of what cinema could be, or what could be considered to be films that people will get out of their house on a rainy Tuesday night to see. Mm-hmm. And they were doing this, I think, because they were looking for a way to portray visually. They were searching for a sort of language that would reflect their reality, which was post-war. There were radical changes going on in France at that time. And in the same way, what I hoped to do in this film was to find a mode of representation that made less reference to other works of art, although of course there are many, many wonderful filmmakers that inspired the way I thought about this film, but that made less reference to works of art and more to the material realities of the characters portrayed.
All right. Okay, bueno, no lo puedo resumir todo, pero básicamente, claro, yo le he hecho una comparación porque él trabajaba como crítico de cine anteriormente a esto. Entonces, claro, le he hecho una referencia y digo, bueno, has hecho lo mismo que la Nouvelle Vague, ¿no? Los críticos que en los años 50 eran críticos de cine y dieron el salto a hacer films. Entonces, bueno, creo que es una sobreestimación de lo que es, pero bueno, de alguna forma, pues de esa experiencia como crítico, efectivamente al final ha hecho que es su primer corto y que está seleccionado. Tell us the origin of this story. Why did you write it? I mean, the story. What did you want it to go to?
Okay, so I think I have to answer this question in two parts.
All right.
First of all, COIFFEUR is a work of improvisation. And I don't know if it will be spoiling the film to say at the very end there's a card that actually says you've just watched a film of improvisation, which of course is taken word for word as an homage to John Cassavetes. It's the title that appears at the end of his first film, Shadows. But it's a work of improvisation, and the reason why it was a work of improvisation is because when I set out to make it, I had just arrived in France. And I wanted to make a film that was relevant to what was going on in this country and in Paris in particular, which is the capital of this country, that asked questions about class and social division, about particularly in France, what does it mean when we live in a world that where money is a sort of transcendental signifier, where it's the arbiter and guarantor of meaning? What happens to love? And I didn't mean love necessarily in terms of romantic love or erotic love, but the love where we say to someone, I am absolutely responsible for you, and I am responsible for you above all others. What happens to these feelings, these most intimate territories when we're living in the world that is in every respect dominated by the mechanisms of capital? But I couldn't do this by just writing a script, because at the time I spoke very little, almost no French. And even if I could read about what was happening, even if I could familiarize myself as much as I could with the specific historical events of France in the last 50 to 100 years, it would lack the particularity of lived experience, of this buzzing, blooming confusion of life. And so what I decided to do was to find some actors, and this process is inspired by Mike Lee, but to ask them, tell me about people that you know, all sorts of people. And we would talk about these different people, and then eventually would select one of them, and that would become the basis of a character. And then, of course, we'd spend a lot more time fictionalizing their biography, changing different circumstances so it would fit within the thematic concerns that I had, and then would put them in different situations that would eventually become the film. As for the second part of the answer, which is to do with, why this particular story, why this particular subject? So I grew up in New Zealand in a very small town with 1,500 inhabitants. It was in the countryside, but what I want to say is that it was a non-place. It was a place where trucks would pass through and occasionally stop to fill up petrol, or if the driver was hungry, to get something to eat. And my parents, they ran a fish and chip shop in this non-place. And I think like as a child, I was, like many children, I was very mischievous. I think it was a trait that was encouraged by the fact that my parents worked so much and I wanted their attention. And so I would always choose the moment in the day during the dinner rush to pester them, to annoy them, to pull on my father's apron strings or my mother's apron strings and say, come outside, play with me, come kick a ball with me. And my father, he would get increasingly agitated because outside there's this menacing rabble of hungry customers who have already waited too long for their food. And so he would get into a fit of epileptic panic. He would start shouting. He would tell my mother to deal with me. And afterwards, of course, he would explain to me. He wouldn't apologize because it was inconceivable to him that a man, a father, should apologize to a 5-year-old child. But he would try to explain to me, I wasn't really angry at you, and I'm sorry, but the reason I couldn't play with you is because we have to be able to put food on the table. And the way we can do this is by working. And so that's really the basic situation of the film Coiffeur. It's the situation where the hairdresser, Luc, he believes he's fulfilled his duty to his sister, to his family, to his mother by providing for them. But his sister, she's not satisfied with this. She believes that to be a family member of someone, to love someone, or to have someone love them, means more than simply providing the basic necessity of food or shelter, or the things that we need to reproduce ourselves.
All right. I'm going to try to resume all
Yes, sorry, that was very, very long.
Yeah, before the interview, you told me that you tend to speak a lot.
Yes.
Yeah. Ok, lo que Simon me está diciendo, claro, yo le había hecho dos preguntas, en realidad, porque le dije que nos contara el origen de la historia y por qué había escrito esa historia. Entonces me ha dicho, bueno, a ver, conté esa historia, el origen de esta historia es una historia de improvisación, en realidad. Una historia en la que él la concibe cuando está recién llegado a Francia y ni siquiera habla francés o hablaba muy poco. Entonces estaba interesado en hablar sobre distintas cuestiones que, en resumidas cuentas, podemos reducirlo al amor, pero no al amor romántico o erótico, sino al amor en general, al amor por las personas y en que todo esté basado en el dinero, no esté basado en el dinero. Entonces tenía más o menos claro de lo que quería hablar. Y lo que hizo es presentarme gente y sobre esa gente que conocieron, les decía, habladme de gente que conocéis para sacar historias y digamos, de ese trabajo de improvisación surgió esa historia que estaba en el marco de eso que él quería contar. ¿Y por qué contó esa historia? Valga decir también que él ha dicho que no hay que desvelar demasiado del cortometraje, efectivamente. Ya lo he dicho yo al principio. El por qué es porque ha contado que él creció en un pequeño pueblo de Nueva Zelanda, donde paraba muy poca gente. Era un pueblo muy pequeño y allí sus padres trabajaban muy duro, tenían una tienda y trabajaban muy duro. Y entonces no le hacían mucho caso porque muchas veces tenían que trabajar. Entonces él decía que cuando llegaba la hora de la cena, pues que montaba pollos, ¿no? Les cabreaba a los padres, ¿no? Les molestaba. Entonces, pues al final el padre, claro, con todo el trabajo, pues la acababa hasta gritando y todo. Y entonces el padre le explicó después, ¿no? A ver, que trabajaba mucho porque había que llevar comida a la mesa y que por eso no podía jugar con él, porque tenía que trabajar. Y de alguna forma, esa experiencia suya en Nueva Zelanda cuando era pequeño se lleva a la película, que sin desvelar el argumento tiene que ver porque efectivamente el peluquero, el protagonista, pues necesita trabajar y trabaja, pero la hermana que va a aparecer no le parece suficiente. No le parece suficiente que sea suficiente con llevar la comida a la mesa. Necesita amor. Entonces hay un cierto paralelismo en ese sentido. No voy a desvelar más, la gente tiene que ver la película. Well, now it was me who spoke a lot. Yeah?
I'm sorry, I must be exhausting you.
No, not at all. I mean, something that is really, really good about your movie is the real tension during the whole drama. You know, you're discovering the things little by little, and there is a real tension all the time between the characters and all the situation. How do you prepare the characters with the actors? Because one other thing about that is, you know, there was so many elements. It could have been a theatrical thing, you know, in the same place, just the same characters. It's not theatrical at all. It's very natural. Maybe it's because it was planned as an improvisation, or it was born from an improvisation. The thing is very natural. How do you prepare the scene with the actors?
So there was quite an intense process of rehearsals, which was not what you see in the film, but it was really to do with, first of all, figuring out each character individually. So I mentioned to you before that I asked the actors to talk about people that they knew. We narrowed the list of people that they talked about down, and eventually we chose one of them. And from there, we would talk about everything, absolutely everything about this character, you know, their family life when they were children, how their grandparents were like, what their lives were like at school, what were their formative moments were, their first kiss, their first experience of loss or grief or disappointment. And we would eventually start creating improvisations around these sorts of things, so they would feel like lived experiences for them. Once each of the individual characters were ready in this way, for the characters who had pre-existing relationships, like the hairdresser and the sister that comes in, or with the hairdresser and his girlfriend, we would just pair them into to do improvisations around the relationships. And then for the scene itself, for what we see in the play, in the film, sorry, not the play. Actually, we just put them together, and for some of the actors, so for example, the customer, that was the first time that she had met any of the other actors. It was the first, and it was in character. And so from there, I think we did 2 or 3 different improvisations with the whole group in a space that more or less resembled where we shot. And after each improvisation, we would sit down and we would just talk about it, sometimes individually with each actor, sometimes as a group, to try to find something that would be coherent and hopefully dramatically satisfying.
All right. Well, le he preguntado que cómo preparó, porque hay una cosa básica de esta película, es la tensión que se crea entre los personajes. La tensión es muy básica, se va descubriendo poco a poco, y le pregunto que cómo ha preparado esto con los personajes. Y entonces dice que lo ha preparado, digamos, de 2 formas distintas, pero todo basado en la improvisación. Por un lado, la improvisación a nivel individual de los personajes vino dado primero por hablar mucho con ellos, especialmente el caso del peluquero y de la hermana, hablando de cómo habían sido sus vidas, incluso el primer beso. O sea, debía de conocer la vida de cada personaje. Entonces esa relación, que además es básica en la película, ¿no? El peluquero y la hermana, se improvisó, en una parte de lo que sería la segunda parte, y es que después de haber improvisado bien a esos 2 personajes, se hizo una improvisación de grupo. Entonces, por ejemplo, la clienta era la primera vez que estaba en ese grupo. O sea que hubo como 2 procesos, ¿no? que encajaron, pero todo basado en la improvisación.
Can I just make one more comment about that? It's very short, yeah. I promise.
Yeah.
Just in response to, why is it not theatrical? I think it's because I didn't ask the actors to just come in and try to produce something, to produce an effect. Often with improvisations, you go in and you ask people, oh, okay, there's an effect. We want to make people laugh, or we want to make people... and in this case, it wasn't that at all. It was really just that I asked them to commit to the truth of their characters and to believe as much as they could in their circumstances, with all their complications or their difficulties. And so I think, or I hope, that's at least why the characters in the film behave as people may do in life.
Right, okay. Sí, quería expresar que los personajes no se trataba de crear un efecto, se trataba de que contaran la verdad de los personajes. Porque además es verdad que lo había comentado antes, y sí, así se lo dije, que tenía todos los elementos para ser una película teatral. Está en un mismo lugar y una serie de personajes que hablan entre ellos. Bueno, podría haberse dado una situación de teatral, pero rebosa mucha verdad, es muy natural la película. Y eso es precisamente lo que él le pidió a los actores, que hubiese verdad en los caracteres, no, en los personajes. Well, I could ask you so many much questions, we could speak longer here, but we don't have time. Okay, so we just, I think it's quite enough, these different points you gave about your film. So I want to thank you for being here today to explain your film and your motivation to do it. And that's it. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Ismail, for your time and for being such a generous and patient interviewer.
No, come on. Okay. Y a los demás que sigan viendo las entrevistas, se los estoy diciendo en todas, que hay que ver las entrevistas de los otros directores y ver las películas en el festival en Aguilar de Campo, del 3 al 9. Un saludo a todos. Bye bye.